So, hi guys. This actually worked this time, but I'm not sure how many of you are actually going to be able to be in here today. And I want this to be more like a question and answer sort of thing as opposed to me sitting here lecturing on any particular topic. So basically, feel free whenever you do get in. Um, there's one of you now, but I can't tell who it is. It just has a little number up in the corner. So if you have any questions, this is the time to ask them. If you want to do it face to face and not through, well, face to text and not through the actual Canvas. I wanted today to be about graduate school because that's usually a pretty significant topic for you guys at this level in your psych careers, being hopefully in the beginning of your careers and taking this class, not further into your psych careers and taking this just because you need to graduate now. Hopefully you're doing it earlier and you're actually going to get information that's going to prevent you from having to go through some of the stuff that those of us that didn't have somebody telling us this wasted a lot of time on. So I have like a general list of things to talk about. So I guess I'll just like rattle through some of this stuff while I wait for somebody to ask me a question on your own. So like I said, if you've got questions and you want them answered, just hop right in. This is a little awkward because this is my first time using this webcam, and I feel like I can see everything as opposed to before where the webcam was horrible. Hi, Richard. Bye, Richard. Where is my presentation? And I also have two screens now, so I'm like looking back and forth and probably going to look a little crazy. So I did a presentation for the School of Psychology for a conference on whether or not grad school was right for you and making the choice on what kind of grad school you would pick if it was right for you. And something that I find people still aren't aware about, even when they get to the senior level courses in psych, is that graduate school doesn't work the same way that your associate's and bachelor's degree might work if you, say, had gone to Miami-Dade and did an associate's and then wanted to continue your bachelor's degree at FIU or any other university. So you go in, you do that 2 years, you get this degree, and then when you go to some other university afterwards, you get in and you usually do the last 2 years of the bachelor's degree, and it's kind of a relatively seamless process unless there's something that the school requires that you didn't already have from your AA. But people have this misconception that master's degrees and PhDs work like that, and that you need to go and get a master's degree before you pursue a PhD in something. So people will think, okay, I need to go and get my master's degree in counseling, and then I can go do a PhD in clinical psychology. Or they'll think I need to get my master's of IO, and then I'll go get my PhD in IO, or whatever the field is. There's a common misconception that you need to do the master's first, and then you can start applying for these doctoral level programs. And that's not the way that it works. So if you do decide that a doctoral degree is right for you, it's not a sequential thing. The best thing for you to do is to be extremely prepared for applying for graduate school by the time that you end your bachelor's degree, so that you can roll right into applying for PhD programs and get into that straight from your bachelor's degree. If you decide that you want to go and do a master's degree and you decide to do it in the same thing that you're going to do a PhD in later, you're going to wind up repeating the same coursework for both degrees. So I'm finishing my PhD in IO psychology. I did do a master's degree, but it wasn't in IO psychology. It was in business. I decided to do it in something that corresponded with my area of interest, but complemented it instead of exactly doing the same thing. And so when I got into the IO program, I did have to take more coursework than maybe I would have had to take if I had just gone into my PhD. But I had a classmate who had decided to do a master's in IO psychology and then go into the PhD in IO psychology. And he ended up repeating 2 years worth of coursework. You have to take all the basic stats classes again, all the basic psychology classes again, all of the basic IO classes again. And it creates a drain in terms of the years you're spending in school and the money that you're spending on school. And it's just not a great idea to do that. Sometimes you'll go into a master's and you'll decide that you want to pursue the extra degree in it later, and you can't really help the sequence of that. But most of you kind of know what you want to do before you even go into any kind of grad school. So don't think that you need to have a master's before you apply to a PhD. So that's common misconception number one. Common misconception number two, that you need a PhD to be able to be successful in psychology. So I'm not sure if I've sent this out to you yet. I certainly will next week or whatever day it was that I said I would talk about careers specifically. But you do not need a PhD to be successful in psychology. There are plenty of degrees that even at an associate's degree level, you can get a career with. There's bachelor level careers, lots of them. That's probably the level that has the most distinct careers, is actually at the bachelor's level. At the master's level, that's where the pay starts to drastically improve beyond the like 30 something, maybe 40 a year that you could get with a bachelor's degree. And then the doctoral level positions are really just specialized versions of the master's degree, like hyper specialized versions. So the common misconception with PhDs is that you need a PhD to become a therapist, and that is absolutely incorrect. So people think that they need PhDs in clinical psychology or counseling psychology in order to go and be a licensed therapist, and that's completely untrue. The base thing that you need to become a therapist and to even own your own practice or to work in hospitals, anything like that, is to have some sort of master's in counseling. So they might call it different things at different universities. At FIU, it's just called the Masters of Counseling program. And once you do that, you have the base degree to where you can go and work in a very wide variety of therapeutic settings. If you want to specialize after that, you can do what's called an LMHC, a licensed mental health. You would be a licensed mental health counselor. And you can Google LMHC and it'll bring up a website for you of who offers programs in that. And it's like a little post-master's degree, 10-month year program or so, where you do some more practical applications of your master's coursework. And you get the fancy title and it makes you a little bit more money, but without having to go through 4 or 5 or 6 more years of school. So if that's what you're hoping to do is counseling, know that it is possible through doing a PhD. It's absolutely possible to go and be a counselor with PhD, but it is not even remotely necessary for you to go and do that and to become successful and to be able to make money off of it. It can become a very lucrative thing. It depends on kind of what field you go into. Family counseling, marriage counseling, relationship counseling, that stuff seems to be a pretty big deal right now. But there's a lot of different areas you can go into and be pretty successful at that master's level. There's 7 of you. I don't know if you're just hanging out with me, or if you do have something to ask and you're just like holding out on me. But I really don't want to just sit here and ramble for however long it takes me to get through all the topics that I have sitting here on this list. So I really, really prefer that you guys ask things that you might have specific questions about. But until you do, I'll sit here and ramble. I'll do it. So I have this list that I made. So if you see me look down from here, it's because I'm reading my little PowerPoint presentation that I did. And the first thing in deciding whether or not you want a PhD or a PsyD or an MD or a JD or an EdD or anything that ends in doctorate degree is you should go through this little checklist and ask whether or not you actually really need to spend that much time on it. First thing, does your career require it? Obviously, if you want to be a doctor, a medical doctor, you're going to have to go through med school. And if you want to be a lawyer, you're going to have to go through law school. But when we're talking about things related to psychology or maybe other careers like occupational therapy or physical therapy or other things that you might get into kind of related to psych, oh no, I do have the chat turned on because Richard said something. Never mind. I got self-conscious for a second. You need to ask whether or not your career requires it. So if you want to become a professor of something, it behooves you to go and get a doctoral degree because you can teach with a master's degree, but it's not going to be a very easy road for you to get a full-time career doing that. There's different things that will limit you if you just have a master's degree. But I see a question, so now I'm getting distracted. What exactly do we have to do for the paper because you're frustrated and confused? I don't want you to be frustrated and confused. No assignment over the course of this semester is designed to frustrate or confuse you at all. So in terms of the final paper, it's meant to give you an opportunity to speak with somebody in your field of potential interest. Now, some of you already know you don't want to be in psychology. You want to go into whatever it is that you want to go into. So you're not limited to speaking with somebody that is in psychology to fulfill this paper. But there is a document on the Canvas that lists some general bits of information in case you're going into this totally blind and you don't have any real questions for the person you're talking to. There's some things that would be good for you to answer in the scope of this paper. And basically, you should approach it like having a conversation with somebody that has a wealth of knowledge in the area that you want to go into, and you ask them whatever questions it is that you have about maybe what it takes to get into that field, what they like about the field, what they dislike about the field, you know, what is some advice that they have for somebody getting into it. I mean, you might not want to ask them direct questions about how much money they make and stuff like that, because that might offend people. It's one of those things that you just typically keep your mouth shut about, but you can certainly ask things in relation to maybe how much not how much they made starting out, but were they able to make a decent living for themselves starting out? How did they do that? What approach did they take? Stuff like that. And you're going to write it in a paper form. I've had people submit it in a question and answer form, and I don't tend to penalize anybody for doing that because this ultimately isn't some sort of academic paper. I'm not even sure this semester that it's set to run this through Turnitin, so you're lucky. Usually I do have it run through Turnitin, so I can see if you copied things directly from a website, so I might look into fixing that. But it's not something that you should worry about, and it's not something that should stress you. And so if you can't find somebody to talk to, I do not mind if you pursue this as more of a research project where you try to find the answers to these types of questions by doing searches online and stuff like that, as long as you use credible sources and you cite them appropriately. I do not accept when you go and use a website and you just copy and paste a whole chunk of information and then you copy and paste it into a document to me and say, look, I researched what it took to be a therapist. Here you go. Here's my assignment. That is not something I want to see. But if you are a person who is very maybe shy or in some way is feeling anxiety about talking to somebody, then you can certainly do this by looking the answers up to these sorts of questions yourself. But you do need to make sure that you are answering these pertinent things as to what being in this career is about. I hope that answers you. If it doesn't, feel free to ask for some sort of specification on whatever it is that I rambled on and didn't answer for you. I'm getting love. Thank you. Thank you for your love. Do I have any advice for how to get graduate school recommendations when you are a fully online student? So, regardless of whether or not your professors are teaching online, most of them do some sort of research. So, I used to take online classes mostly because I suffer from migraines and from social anxiety and all kinds of things that made online classes a lot easier. Not necessarily the physical distance, like some of you guys live in some really cool places that aren't Miami, and I'm jealous of you. But I kind of figured out that you can talk to your professors, your online professors, about what they're doing in terms of their research, and potentially even find ways to get involved with them without necessarily having to go to campus or ever meet up with anybody. So, one way that you can kind of get your foot in the door with recommendations, especially if you're relatively early on and you do have some interest in what these people are studying, is to talk to them about their research, explain that you're an online student, and say that you really want to get involved and you'd love to get some advice on how. Another thing is, the best way for you to get a recommendation is really to have taken multiple classes with somebody. When somebody sees your work from different perspectives, from different courses, different subjects, it's much easier for them to write a letter of recommendation. But in some way, you have to figure out how to build a relationship with some of these professors. Obviously, there are some that are more approachable than others, and you'll be able to feel this out as you go through your courses. But you have to figure out how to introduce yourself to them and develop that kind of relationship. I totally love when people write to me and talk to me about their ambitions and whatnot, and try to build the workup relationship towards, I need a letter of recommendation from you. Some people maybe aren't as receptive to that, but you can certainly ask any of your online professors. You just need to make sure that they have some sort of background on who you are, and you take the initiative to figure out who the professor is as well, so that you can build that relationship. I don't know, maybe ask them if you can do some sort of virtual office hours, or talk to them on the phone, or ask for some feedback on a paper that you already know is really great. I don't know, find some way to get into their head so that they can associate a proverbial face with your name. Where can you find the questions for the grads or for the paper? It should be on the home page. When you scroll all the way down, there should be, I'm not sure off the top of my head what the actual module is called, but it's got all of the assignments in a docx form, and there should be final paper, something that says final paper in that. And it should be, again, on your home page, and I think it's the bottom module on the home page. If you can't find it, let me know and we'll give more directions. I'll log into Canvas and see where it is. I don't have Canvas open right now, though. I want to interview an FBI agent for the paper, but I feel like this would be impossible with it being a top secret agency, especially since I don't know anyone in the field. Yeah, there are some fields where you're going to want to do this assignment, and it's going to be really difficult to find somebody. Usually my forensic psychologists and criminal psychologists, people that have the ambition towards being that, find it hard to find people to interview because there's so few of them. And say you want to go into human resources, that's a field where they might not be able to divulge a lot to you because due to different reasons, they have to keep their information confidential. So if you are interested in an area that it's relatively impossible to find somebody, that's where I would suggest taking that research route, where you start doing some educated Googling on the career. try to find job listings for it, which I'm not sure when it comes to the FBI exactly what they would list in a job listings thing. But I would think that you can certainly go to some government websites and get an idea of what it would take to be an FBI agent. I had a family member who wanted to be in the FBI, and I know it's a very rigorous procedure and it involves a lot of background checking. And there were people that would drive by our family's houses and scope it out and do interviews. There was a lot of different levels and components to getting into the FBI. So be prepared if that's what your dream career is, to kind of have a very long courtship with the government before you get into a position like that. It's not impossible, but it's definitely something that they take very seriously. So I would tend to agree with you. You're probably not going to find an agent that would be willing to talk to you, because most of the time nobody even knows that they're FBI agents. For a school psychologist, what course and/or program should you take for grad school? For school psychology, there's usually programs that specialize in that. At FIU, there is a school psychology program or a school counseling program, but it's under the education school. It's not under the grad school of psychology or the Department of Psychology. So your first thing is, when you're looking at universities that you potentially want to go to for that program, determine whether or not that program is under education itself or if it's under psychology. It's probably going to be under education. So like I said, at FIU, it's kind of like a one-step procedure. They have the program there, you do the program there, you get certified through them, and then you're ready to go like scope out the market for school psychology. It might be under psychology for some programs. Some schools might not have programs at all, and you'll have to be creative and figure out if they do have a degree that you can kind of shape towards school psychology. So a lot of master's programs offer you opportunities to do electives or even to do certifications and things, where you can take that as an opportunity to specialize in a particular area that there might not be a program in. So maybe they have a counseling psychology program somewhere with some electives where you can kind of cross take courses with the education department and then work towards that certification in school psychology. But most places should have a program. Just try to find it under the education department, because it's probably not going to be under direct psychology. If I get a recommendation letter now and graduate in 2 years, will that recommendation letter still be valid? So I don't see why your letter wouldn't still be valid, but I would think that in the span of 2 years, especially if you're saying that you're getting a letter as a sophomore and you're graduating in 2 years, what I would be more concerned about is that your letter of recommendation is coming from somebody that doesn't know you from advanced coursework in whatever degree you're pursuing, and that you have somebody from a more basic class, like one of the 1,000 or 2,000 level courses. And your letters are going to look better when they come from the more advanced coursework teachers. So as you keep moving forward, I would either take more courses with the person that you initially got the letter from, or work on relationships with people that are teaching your upper division coursework. And then at the end of it, when you go to apply, if that initial letter is still the best letter, the best option for you, you can certainly submit it. I mean, you can edit the date on the letter so that it doesn't say that it's from a couple of years ago, and nobody will know the difference in that. Most of the time, letters, like even if you have an actual written letter from a professor now, if you go and apply, most, if not every single recommendation letter process is online, and it sends a link directly to the professor, and the professor has to upload the letter and usually answer some questions about what percentile of different things that you fall in. Like you're in the top 10 percentile of research participants that you're the top 10% of writers, you're the top 10% of whatever. Like, so they have to answer a form when you use them as a recommendation. So if it's the same person, they'll probably update the letter. If they're good, they'll update the letter and submit it with the new date on it. So hold on to it, but more importantly, hold on to the relationship with the person who wrote it, because you will need them in the future. There is not going to be any place that allows you to just submit a letter without it coming directly from the person who wrote it. Oh, you were asking me earlier for the memory and memory improvement course paper. Well, you should write to me through Canvas, and I will walk you through the memory paper, because I don't want to really get too much into memory related stuff with a group of people who are not in the memory class. So definitely write me an email, and by the end of the night, I'll respond to you with some guidance on that particular paper. I've reached the end of the questions that are there. Yeah, hi Wildcard. Thank you for coming in here. Have saboteurs from my real life floating around in here watching me. Okay, so you guys aren't asking anything, so I'm just gonna keep going with my little thing that I was talking about earlier. In terms of whether or not you would or wouldn't want to go to grad school, or would or wouldn't want to get a PhD, you're going to want more advanced degrees if you're working in clinical settings. So if you're going into hospitals, or if you're working with really high risk populations, like special needs children, or like things that deal with substance abuse, or prisoners, like different populations that require extra levels of certifications and clearance and experience. Those types of things would probably benefit you to have a more advanced degree. Do you want to work in high-level administrative positions? So if you ever want to get to a point where you're at like a CEO level of an organization, whatever the organization is, it doesn't have to be something related to business, but it could be you want to be an administrator in a college, or you want to be an administrator in a public school, or whatever it is. Usually having the doctoral level degrees help you in attaining those types of positions. And then there are some people that just want to have a PhD to have a PhD. So if you're one of those people, then I can't help you. You're going to be in the long journey, just like me. I've been in school full time for 15 years now. Don't be like me. Don't do it. Make wiser choices, which usually don't involve getting the doctoral degree. A lot of times people ask me, but nobody has asked me yet this year, what the difference is between a PhD and a PsyD. So just in case you were wondering, because I know you were totally wondering, and I just totally, I read your mind right now. The difference between a PsyD and a PhD is that usually PsyDs come from institutions that are privatized, number one, and number two, that don't focus as much on research. So it's very, very seldom that you're going to find a public research institution like FIU offering a PsyD. And there's a couple different reasons why this is true and why these degrees are different. A PsyD focuses a lot more on the application of the coursework than doing research on the coursework. So if you were doing a PsyD in counseling or in clinical psychology, you would do some degree of research. Every doctoral level thing has some degree of research in it, but you would probably spend a lot more time doing like practicum hours and actively doing therapy with whatever community you were working with. Whereas the PhD in clinical psychology, if you tell the admissions committee for a clinical psychology PhD program that you ever want to have a private practice or go into practice as a therapist or psychologist, they will not admit you into the program. PhDs, regardless of what area you get them in, are focused in research, and they thrive on research because it's what keeps their program going. They do research, the research brings money in, the money then goes to fund the program, which does more research, which ends up with more money, and it's this vicious cycle of what happens. So PsyDs tend to not be funded at all. When you get into a PhD, you typically have some sort of funding afforded to you by the school. It might not be much, excuse me, might not be much, and it might not be for the duration of the time that you're in the actual program, but there is usually some funding associated with it because you're expected to do the research and be a cog in the wheel of this research cycle. But PsyDs, not having all of these papers that they publish and conferences that they go to, they don't bring money in like that. So these programs are things that you're going to spend a lot of money to do. So it's why you only see PsyDs at private institutions like Nova has a PsyD, Carlos Albizu has a PsyD. There's a lot of small private colleges that have PsyD programs, and you're going to pay a lot of money to get into them. One of the perks, though, is that a PsyD program usually takes way more applicants than a PhD program was. In my cohort of my IO PhD at FIU, I'm one of 2 people from my year. The next year had 3. The year after that, I think, had 3. So it's a very small incoming class when you're looking at these programs, whereas a PsyD might have 40 or 50 different people. Part of the reason why they can take more people is that those people are paying for their own college degree. So it's like, sure, come on in. We'll take more money. This works for me, sort of deal. I'm feeling a little self-conscious because you're not asking any more questions. So I don't know if you're totally bored and you just got this on in the background. You're like in the kitchen making a pizza or something, or wishing that you were making a pizza now that I've talked about pizza. I had pizza yesterday, so I don't really want pizza right now. But you're here, so you might as well ask me something. I don't care what you ask me. You can ask me anything. You can ask me anything. Just don't let me ramble. Don't let me ramble. What would be the easiest or best way to get your foot in the door with a criminal psychology degree? Criminal psychology is a little bit of a tough one for me to answer with a lot of detail, partially because I don't really have much experience with criminal psychology, and partially because not much of anybody in psychology has experience with criminal psychology. So you can approach it kind of from a criminal justice perspective, where you do some sort of dual thing in criminal justice and psychology and try to find some sort of position that has some element of both of them, or you can go directly towards trying to find something that is literally in criminal psychology. But at a bachelor's level, that's going to be really difficult, because usually criminal psychology is going to involve something related to either counseling or to forensics, or something that requires an advanced degree to even get the job. So getting your foot in the door, I would think that doing maybe some sort of government job is going to be one of your best ways to do so. There are a lot of positions that you can get with a bachelor's level psych degree, working in like detention centers, working in prisons, working in juvenile detention centers, whatever type of detention center related to the prisoner population. That might be one of your best ins. Because in doing criminal psych, that's one of the areas where they're going to say, oh, we want you to have so many years of experience with criminal populations. And a good way to do that is to literally work with the criminal population. And they do have psychology related positions. What do they call them? I forget what exactly they call them in prisons, but there are positions that you can go and you can get, and there are part-time ones, there are full-time ones. There's a wide variety of different ways that you can kind of get your foot in the door in terms of working specifically with criminal populations. We had a professor here. I'm trying to remember his last name. He teaches the psychotherapy class. He teaches it every single semester. So you might be able to find him like that. If you email me, I can find his name, because I took psychotherapy with him many years ago, and he worked as a psychologist in a prison and did that for many years. I'm not sure if he's still there or not, but he would be the best person to give you some insight on how you would get your foot in the door with that I know of. You're not probably going to receive a lot of help from the legal psychology people, because legal psychology, at least in the scope of how FIU does legal psychology, they're focusing more on juries and witness testimony and decision making and like what happens in the actual courtroom, as opposed to the criminal side of things. They're looking more at the aftermath of how criminal proceedings work. So that's probably not what you're interested in. But write to me, remind me if that was not helpful, and I can try to get you some more information on it. So for the graduate program at FIU, do I need to apply to a different school, or can I apply to the School of Education, being I enrolled in the online psychology course? This was for the school psychology thing. But do I need to apply to a different school, or can I apply to the School of Education? Once you're talking about graduate level coursework, you're going to go apply directly to that program under the grad school, and it's not going to matter really what school it's in or what school you came from. So I know you get accepted into the different schools at bachelor's levels, but that's not really how it works at the grad level. You'd go in, you'd do the online application for that particular master's degree, and then it would send you into the pool of the other people in that program, and then you'd get in and you'd be in the School of Education or whatever. No, College of Arts, Sciences, and Education now. So now we're all under one roof anyways, so it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. Just focus on finding the application and doing the online application for it. I'm not sure when exactly the master's program in school psychology starts. So there are some master's programs that start only in fall, like the counseling program only starts in fall, and they do a year rotation and they accept a new year. There's some that every semester they have a rolling admissions and they start a new cohort in fall and spring and summer, and it doesn't matter, and there's this revolving kind of admissions date. So you'd have to go and look and see if the school psychology program is one of those once a year things, or whether they take applicants on a rolling basis. Let me scroll through my little my little presentation thing here and see if there's anything that I really want you to know. That I really, really want you to know. So in terms of what an actual graduate application looks like, questions. Heard that a few grad schools with PhD programs, the school technically pays for you to go to school. Is that actually true? I think it's just selective schools. So there is this idea, right, that a PhD is like a 4 or 5 year program. If you are some sort of superhuman with superpowers that only focuses on school and has no other life whatsoever, then it might be possible for you to do that. But the average probably skews a little bit more to the 6 or 7 year mark of how long it takes you to be in the program. So Jackie XX, I'm not sure. Are you the Dos Equis man? Are you the greatest man alive? And that's what the XX is. I'm trying, I just totally distracted myself with my own stupid humor there. So your question is kind of true and false at the same time. Like, They do, in some universities, if not most universities, pay for you to do your first 4 years. But this is how they pay for it. So you come in and you get something that's called an assistantship. If you're really lucky, you find some place that gives you an assistantship to where you are just going to school and that's it. You don't have to do any sort of work whatsoever. They give you money, they pay your tuition, they pay a portion of your health insurance, and you're good to go. That's probably not going to happen. What's probably going to happen is you're going to get in and you're going to get a general graduate assistantship that is mostly, if you do get it when you get in your first year, it's pretty guaranteed for the first 4 years, and you can usually get it your fifth year, but after that, you're not going to be on assistantship anymore. And what happens in those years is the first year or two, you're probably going to be a general assistant working in a desk somewhere in the department, or not even in your own department. Like the people who do advising help, those are mostly grad students that are there on assistantship. A lot of people who work in like desk jobs at FIU are grad students on assistantships. So you might do that. You might be a teaching assistant, so you might be assigned to a professor and to one or more of their courses to help them grade, to help them proctor exams and whatnot. Or you might be a research assistant. So you might be sent to a lab and have tasks that you're supposed to do within that lab. But the general idea is that you will work 20 hours a week in one of these positions, and in turn, they will pay for your tuition, they will give you a yearly stipend, and they will pay for a portion of your health insurance. The problem is that this stipend is currently less than $20,000 a year. I think it's something like 19, or maybe just starting to approach 20,000 now. It was 18 when I started, and I know that it's gone up a little bit. And when you accept this assistantship, you are writing in basically blood. You're like signing your name away, saying that you're not going to work anywhere else. So you have to figure out during those 4 to 5 years how you're going to survive on $18,000 to $20,000 a year in Miami if you're doing it at FIU. Other schools might offer different amounts, but it's usually going to work the same way. You're going to be on assistantship. You're going to be doing a certain amount of work. And the reason that they literally have you sign a paper saying you're not going to work anywhere else is that they're investing money in you, and they want you to be focused on school. They want school to be your number one priority. That's why you're limited to those 20 hours. And if you go and work somewhere else, they will find you. They will utilize the IRS, and then you will have to pay all of that assistantship back. So yes, in some ways, there are schools, lots of schools, and lots of programs at the PhD level that will pay for your degree to some extent, some portion of your degree. But it comes with stipulations, it comes with downsides, and you have to do a lot of financial planning. So if you're not living at home or living with a bunch of roommates and you're trying to live on your own, you're going to be utilizing the FAFSA student loan option of that portion of your graduate career. Hi, I'd like to become a psychology professor at a college or university level. I've had 1 or 2 professors at Miami-Dade with only master's degree. So I wonder if PhD is a must. So they allow you to teach with master's degrees. Obviously, I am not graduated yet with my PhD, so I am only at a master's degree level. But they are not allowed. Number one, they have to have a certain ratio of PhD to master's people in the schools. So they can only have so many people at a master's level teaching those courses. They need to have PhDs as their primary full-time professors. So the people that you experienced at Miami-Dade, which I am definitely that person at Miami-Dade right now because I also teach at Miami-Dade, the people that have the master's degree are adjuncts, and they're not guaranteed any number of classes for the duration of the school year. Like There are years where I get 5, there are years where I get 1, there are years where I get 0. They basically call the adjuncts, which is the highest that you can be really with a master's degree, is really at that adjunct level. They call them when they need them, and usually in case of emergency. It's not a stable position unless you know somebody and you were there long, long ago. So you might have a full-time person with a master's degree, but you can guarantee that either there's nepotism going on or that person's been at Miami-Dade for a really long time and they got in before, long before most of this stuff became rules. In terms of FIU, you are very, very, very going to seldom find master's level people teaching a lot of courses. I am fortunate enough to be somebody who is an adjunct with a master's degree that gets a lot of courses, but I also want to focus my degree in teaching, not in research. Sorry, FIU, I disappointed them there. So that's helped in terms of getting these classes. But the only reason that I have the ability to teach is because I'm a graduate student. They would not hire me off the street with just a master's degree. It would have to be a PhD. So I teach now as an adjunct, but it's because I started as a graduate assistant. And once you get past the master's level coursework in a PhD, you kind of get the right to teach classes on your own. So you'll see 3rd and 4th year PhD students and 5th, 6th, like the 3rd year on PhD students teaching their own classes. And those are the only people that you'll see really at FIU without a PhD teaching courses, because they just don't hire people at a master's level to do that. You need to have the PhD. So you can attempt to go and get a master's degree and have a teaching career with it, but it is not the best option. And even with a PhD, it is relatively difficult to get teaching jobs. There's just not as many of them as there are people that want them. And especially if you're talking about like wanting to get a job at Miami-Dade, it takes a very, very, very long time to get a full-time position at a place like Miami-Dade, unfortunately. Oh, I've got 7 of you left. Okay, you 7 people. Every time I start talking about something, somebody asks me a question. So that means one of 2 things. I either need to start talking about something random, or I need to threaten you by saying I'm going to turn the little web thing off if nobody asks me any more questions. But I did want to say this one slide that I have, which is what you should expect about potentially applying to grad school. Like, what are the components of an actual application and the application process? So what do they look for when you're applying? They look for undergraduate involvement. So for those of you who are fully online students, this is an area that you're probably going to have to make up for this by excelling in other areas, like doing really well on your test scores, having a really great GPA, having those good letters of recommendation, because involvement shows that you can work with other people. And as much as we all hate other people, you need to be able to work with them in graduate school, because group projects and group everything is in groups. You're never going to be by yourself again. So they look for involvement. They look for research experience. But when you're going to FIU, you go through a research sequence. So whether or not you realize it, you actually have research experience. So don't sell yourself short when you're writing up a resume or a CV or your grad applications. Utilize the experiences that you have both in classes that ask you to do research papers and in all of the method sequence that asks you to do your own research projects and whatnot. I actually have a resume thing that I've written up for my students that writes out the entire research method sequence in something that you can put on a CV. So I can attach that to you guys too. A lot of programs look for volunteer experience, especially if you're going into med school. I know they want a certain amount of volunteer hours. That could also be shadowing hours. So if you're going into any of the like speech, occupational, physical therapy things or med school, having some sort of shadowing experience with a doctor is pretty important. So they look for that. They want a statement of purpose, which either they're going to give you a prompt and ask you to write an essay based on the prompt, or they're going to ask you for a general statement of purpose where you're basically going to write to them why you got into the field you want to get in, or why you want to go into the field that you're applying to, what led you there, what are your past experiences that make you a good candidate, and if you're doing a PhD, who do you want to work with in terms of your research in the future. They're going to want either a CV or a resume. A CV is just kind of like an academically oriented resume where you get to put all of your stuff from school. A resume is a little more cut and dry for whatever job position you're going for, so that doesn't necessarily apply here. They're going to want rec letters. Most of the time they want 3, some want 2. They're going to want test scores, so GRE, GMAT, LSAT, MCAT. Oh, there's one for dental school. I don't remember. It's D something. I don't remember what it is. But they're going to look for test scores. There are some programs, which it's blowing my mind, but that are now starting to waive test scores if you have a certain GPA. So I was looking at the Masters of Human Resource program with somebody the other day. And if you have over a 3.0 GPA, they waive the GRE and GMAT requirement. Mind blown. I wish that programs had done that when I was applying to them, because the GRE and the GMAT, for that matter, suck. They royally suck. I'm sorry, but you're going to have to go through it unless you apply to one of these programs, but they suck. They suck. I hate them. Sometimes they might ask you for writing samples, so save the big research papers that you're writing for different classes, because it definitely helps, especially if you're going to go into a PhD program, because you're going to be doing a lot of writing and they like knowing that you are a literate person and have successfully done research-based writing before. And then they're going to look at your grades. So I was very naive. I was very naive when I started undergrad out, and I thought, if I have really great grades, that's all I need. And I was obsessed about 4.0, and somebody gave me an A- my first year in, and I fought them. I went to the English department and fought them and got it changed to an A, and fought all these professors who gave me A- and different stuff. And then I realized that your grades, once they're past a certain point, don't necessarily matter anymore. So having a 3.0 and up is very important in terms of applying to grad school. Some might start at 3.2. If you're a 3.5 and up, you're pretty much in like the nice, safe, happy GPA zone where they're going to go, yes, you were a really good student, and then they're going to stop looking at it. Sometimes having a 4.0 or like an unusually high GPA can work against you, especially if you don't have the other involvement sorts of things, because it can suggest to a program that you're so focused on your grades that you fail to interact with other people, and that you're not prioritizing you're behind the window right now. I don't know what that means. That sounds really ominous. Person who doesn't have a name. Are you literally behind my window? Because that would be interesting. Take a look. I do not want to take a look outside my window right now. That is very creepy. Any other legitimate questions that don't involve me getting up and looking outside my window? Now that I'm sufficiently creeped out by whoever did tell me to get up and look outside my window, I will bid you adieu for the night, especially since we're getting to the to the hour point, and I don't usually like going over an hour on these because people get bored and they stop listening to them. And then some of you are not going to be reading the chat, and you're going to go, what are you talking about in terms of the window thing anyways? So if you do have questions, if you go through this, you watch this, you end up with questions, or you just have questions in general, go ahead and email me, and I will do my very best to get back to you within like a 24-hour period. I'm usually pretty good about that, but I can only do so much from my phone, which is where I usually answer emails from. So thank you guys for tuning in today, and we'll go through specifically like all of the different careers at the different academic levels in the next webinar that we go through. I'm trying to remember what exact date it was. I think I said it was Wednesday, but whatever it was in the email that I gave to you. So on that day, we'll go specifically over careers, like one by one, all the different fields, like education and social work and legal and IO and school stuff and everything that relates to it, like whether or not you want to be a lawyer or a doctor, all the different fields. So if that's what your primary interest is, be here then, and don't creep me out by talking about windows.